So, I recently just finished Horizon Zero Dawn, and while I was really impressed with the general premise and the giant robot fights, it kinda left me more and more disappointed as time went on. As I kept playing, I just kept getting more and more frustrated that the cool level design and fun climbing mechanics were being completely trampled upon by never-ending dialogue, pointless grinding, and endless boring landscapes. Basically, if I could somehow just remove all the annoying open world stuff and just skip from main mission to main mission, the game would probably be 100 times better. Open worlds just aren't that fun to me, I guess. But then I started playing Halo Infinite, another futuristic open world game, and I had a completely different experience with it. A positive one. In fact, I would kind of say Halo has the opposite problem. The open world is a great time to mess around in, but the main missions themselves are kind of lackluster. So that got me thinking, what makes a good open world? It's kind of a difficult question for me to answer, because as I've clearly just demonstrated, most games of that genre are kind of hit or miss for me. They're either one of my favorite games of all time, where I can spend hours finishing pointless quests I made up myself, or I rush to finish the main quest as fast as possible, and then completely forget I have the game 30 seconds after I take the disc out. I've been playing through a couple of open world games in my library, both good and bad, and trying to piece together what specific properties one needs to have in order to be somewhat decent. Now this list is going to be entirely subjective and specific to my tastes, so these aren't definitive, unbreakable rules at all. But I'm going to try and provide some decent points to support my case of why more games should adhere to these principles, in my opinion at least. Oh yeah, and most of the games I'm using as examples here aren't technically open worlds, but they work for explanation purposes, so I'm going to talk about them. Number 1, make the world diverse and contrastive. Fancy words. If you ask anyone, what's your favorite area in Super Mario Odyssey? He'll say the Cap Kingdom, or the Ice Kingdom, or probably the Metro Kingdom. That's because every area in this game is completely distinct from each other. They're filled with interesting NPCs and landmarks, stuff that you can recognize and remember. I can just say the giant skeleton in the Cascade Kingdom, or the Oasis in the Sand Kingdom, and you know exactly what I'm talking about without me even having to show any footage. Now imagine trying to ask the same question about Assassin's Creed, an open world franchise that I don't like. Go up to someone and say, what's your favorite area of Assassin's Creed 3? And then watch her brain melt as she stares at you trying to figure out what that question is even supposed to mean. Everything in this game looks exactly alike. There's no way to tell everything apart. Number 2, make the main quest short and sweet. Weird question. What's the purpose of putting a main quest in your open world game? Seriously, if the point is that it's a giant universe to get lost and immersed in, why even bother adding a main story at all? Well, the answer that I've come up with is that it helps the player understand the world when they enter it for the first time. Look at Breath of the Wild, the current pinnacle of open worlds in my judgment. It employs this philosophy pretty much perfectly. Its core theme is running around Hyrule with complete freedom and doing whatever you feel like doing. But if you were to just start off the game and be dropped into it with no waypoints or direction, you wouldn't even have any idea what you could do even. So the main quest takes up just enough time to introduce you to the game's mechanics and lore, and then gets out of the way so you can start adventuring. If you really want to and your skills are legendary enough, you can just go straight to Ganon and finish the game in like 45 minutes. And even if you take all the time to do things the right way and free all the divine beasts first, you're still gonna be finished with the quote-unquote main campaign mode in a day or two. And guess what? After all that, you're left with the completed map, all the best weapons and armor, enough hearts to pull up the Master Sword, and fast travel points all across the world. Now the real game starts, exploring the land and seeing what cool stuff you can find. Step 3, make your world have stuff in it. I feel like a lot of developers put a ton of time into crafting these beautiful, ginormous landscapes, and only after they've put the finishing touches on everything, suddenly remember like, oh nuts! I was actually supposed to put stuff here. Okay, let's put a shop here, here, and here, spread some tough boss enemies with extra health around, and drop a couple of treasure chests all over the place in hard-to-reach places. That sounds like enough material for a map that takes 2 full hours to cross. There's no real way to keep players engaged with a huge map if it's completely empty. You'd be better off making a single linear level with a load of stuff to do in it than a sprawling open area devoid of life or fun. There doesn't even necessarily need to be a challenge to hold players' attention. You just need to give them something to interact with. Scatter squads of easy-to-kill enemies everywhere, put some NPCs with goofy dialogue, add fun, random minigames to play. If you can go over a minute without spotting something interesting, you might want to consider shrinking the size of your map a little bit. Obviously within reason. Number 4. Make it fun to move around the world. This kind of goes hand in hand with point 3. If you're gonna put huge barren wastelands in between all the fun stuff, at least make it entertaining to cross them. Mirror's Edge Catalyst and Spider-Man PS4 are great examples of this principle. Since fluid traversal is a core part of the games themselves, getting around the map is just as much fun as the main missions. I think the real test to see if you've achieved this is to play the game for a little while without using fast travel. If you start to get bored, maybe spice up the movement a little bit. In Halo Infinite, there are so many cool ways to get around, I genuinely felt like I would be missing out if I just jumped from location to location. And that's all thanks to one mechanic, the grappling hook. You can grapple across ledges, swing yourself around like Spider-Man, dash to an enemy vehicle and hijack it like GTA. Hey, you didn't hear it from me, but you can even do this if you need a little vertical momentum. You got vehicles you can summon from any of the bases you've conquered, which your fellow soldiers will sometimes hitch a ride on if they're nearby. Then you can drive them off a cliff and kill them all. It's kinda funny. You can drive over enemies and kill them in a single hit. You can drive over allies and get yelled at for being a big old jerk. Bottom line is, there's a lot of fun to be had just moving around the world, and that's why I went through the entire campaign without fast traveling even once. And I shouldn't even have to say this, but apparently there are developers out there who need to hear it for some reason. You should never, under any circumstances whatsoever, make fast travel that forces you to craft in-game travel packs every time you warp somewhere. Fast travel is meant for covering long distances when walking there on foot would take too long or be too boring. It only exists to avoid needless inconvenience. If you make it difficult to fast travel, you've effectively forced players to waste time running everywhere, which is the one problem fast travel is supposed to alleviate. To be fair, Horizon does give players the option of crafting a special travel pack that never runs out so they can fast travel to their heart's content, but the fact that you would even need to craft an item like this makes me unreasonably mad. I know this whole thing was entirely subjective, and maybe I'm wrong about all of it, but I really hope some developers take this advice to heart and work on making open worlds that make the games more fun, because I really feel like it made Zero Dawn more boring. It wasn't the only issue I had with it. I kinda think the combat and story could have been a little more engaging, but it would have been so much more tolerable if I could just go from mission to mission without having to slog through so much tedious walking and pointless dialogue. And at the end of the day, if we could get some more games like Halo Infinite and less like Zero Dawn, I think we would all groan a lot less when we heard a game was going open world. So now I'm gonna put Horizon Zero Dawn in my open world game tier list and completely forget it exists. Bye!